Okay. The last rule, the Rule 1660-0125, that rule meeting was concluded and is over. And I'm sorry I surprised you with a break, but this next rule that's coming up, I thought we may be sitting in here a while, and I want to give everybody a chance to take a break and go to the restroom and get relaxed. So at this time, we're going to go into another rulemaking hearing, and I'm fixing to read my opening statement. This is a rulemaking hearing before the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission to consider amending Rule 1660-01-28, which deals with rules and regulations governing license and permit fees. My name is Jeff Griggs, and I will conduct the hearing. Again, the procedures will go like this. Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency staff will present information on the proposed rule amendment. Commission members will be permitted to comment and ask questions. Members of the audience will be permitted to comment and ask questions. Staff members and members of the audience wishing to speak should identify themselves before speaking. I reserve the right to limit comments and discussion, especially in cases of repetition. At this time, I would call to the front Chris Richardson, who is the Special Assistant to the Director, to present Rule 1660-01-28. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Since 1949, the funding that supports the wildlife and fisheries in management in Tennessee has been generated through the sale of hunting and fishing licenses. The sportsmen and women and wildlife supporters in Tennessee are rightfully proud of the work that this agency has been able to accomplish through their support. And it's undoubted that without their support, wildlife and fisheries in Tennessee would not be where they are today. Tennessee is unique in the manner in which their wildlife agency is funded. We rely almost exclusively on the sale of hunting and fishing licenses in order to have the revenue to fund the programs that we implement. And while we are very proud of the fact that we are self-funded, as the cost of doing business increases, we are forced to look at increasing revenue to keep up with the times. When you have a structure like Tennessee has, the first place you have to look is to the license fees and permits. As an agency and a commission, through previous budget years, we have worked together to streamline and economize the agency and cut expenses. For example, we have 46 fewer employees working for this agency now than we did in 2008. Any further substantial cuts will result in programmatic losses and loss of services to the constituents in Tennessee. To avoid those lost services and programs, our only option is to consider increasing fees. Today, we are asking the Commission to consider Rule 1660-01-28 relative to license fees and permits. This agency does not take license increases lightly. This is the first time we have sought a license increase in a decade, and it's only the second time this agency has sought a license increase in 25 years. The amount of this requested increase is based on the cost of living index increase since the fees were last adjusted in 2005. That cost of living increase has been 22% over that time. This requested increase is also the smallest increase in the history of TWRA. It projects to generate approximately 19% in additional revenue through the sale of permits and licenses. This proposed rule also makes slight changes to our license structure, and it creates new licenses and permits for hunting and fishing guides and wildlife management area users. With that, Mr. Chairman, the agency requests the Commission's consideration and passage of Rule 1660-01-28.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion to have a second.
Second.
All right, at this time, I will go to discussion, and the chair will recognize Budget Chairman Harold Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to step down and give a brief presentation. Get me started, guys. Something tells me most of you are in here for this very reason. And number one, I personally want to thank each of you for coming today. Chris said some things that are most appropriate for the Budget Committee. I hope at the end of this presentation you'll see that this has not been taken lightly. It would be very easy to go through and say, let's do our cuts, then let's do a 22%. Let's adjust the fees to where we can create 22% more revenue, and we're done. That was not the case. In fact, the proposal that I'm making to the commission as a whole today is one that the committee considers a paradigm shift. And it's a privilege to represent the committee. I hope that you will see that we are truly that we are committed to living within our means, and that we're taking a more business approach to how we attack the fees and the revenues and our cost. It's been said that we need to run state agencies as a business. That has been the attitude of this committee, is to do that very thing. Unofficially, I consider this step 2 in a 4-step process. Again, this is part of the paradigm shift that we're going to be discussing today. You've seen the press releases, you've seen some of the information distributed by the agency. This is not going to be a repeat of that. That is not fair to you. What it is an attempt to do is to share with you the process that we have gone through as a committee to arrive at where we are today. There's a lot of misinformation out there. I have read articles where we are proposing a 30% increase. I've had letters come which say that this is a result of our poor investments in Fannie Mae. It is all across the board. And what we have tried to be, and I believe you will agree, we've done our best to be transparent in this, and that much of this misinformation is just that, misinformation. Commissioners, the slides that you're going to be seeing on the screen are in your notebooks. Also in your notebooks, and for the public's information, the current fees and number of licenses sold, as well as the fees proposed under the various rulemaking activities that may take place today, are in the back for you to review. There's a smaller table in the back that is a summary of the interest rates that we have been able to be afforded on our endowments. My goal in these next few minutes is to basically accomplish 5 things, and that is, number one, I want you to see the history that this process has gone through. I want you to know what committee activities have taken place. Most of those public, those that weren't public, were merely informational meetings. No deliberation, no action, no nothing, just informational meetings. The third is to present what our revenue proposal is as a committee. There have been some comments that have been made. I've tried to pick a handful of those that may help answer some questions in here, but by no means do we want to squelch any comments that you have or thoughts. We have done our best to listen, and we continue to do that through the course of this meeting. And the last is just some personal concluding remarks on this. 2004 was the last comprehensive adjustment to our license structure. At that time, the legislature agreed to allow the agency, the commission, to adjust agency fees up to the rate of inflation, the CPI, or Consumer Price Index, if you will. At that time, in 2004, the commission, chaired by Chairman Bill Cox, was allowed to go back as far as the previous fee adjustment, which was 1990. Those adjustments at that time reflected overall average of about 35%. That increase generated a reserve, and there's been lots of talk of our reserve, that the intent of that reserve was to let it build up in the first few years, and then in the later years, the agency could draw off of that reserve to continue to meet its cash flow needs, so as to hopefully prolong any license and fee increases for 6 to 8 years. They did one other thing that was above and beyond the call of duty, but was right on behalf of the citizens of this state. and that is they went through each individual license and evaluated how should we allocate the cost to each of these users across the state. They did a yeoman's job, and it has benefited our committee, and the committee made a commitment to take that information and build upon it. 2013, staff had the commission in workshop regarding the budget for FY 2014-2015. At that time, the infamous name of the doomsday graph came up. And basically, it has been a graph of our costs related to our wildlife funds and the depletion of the reserves. Keeping in mind, there was an intentionality of building up the reserves and then allowing them to be depleted so as to stretch out license fee cost. I do want to make one clarification here. Our agency and our commission deal with two distinct budgets. There is the wildlife budget, and that includes our fisheries and other activities, and then there is our boating budget. We must keep those separate. And I know there may be people in this room who have made recommendations related to boating in hopes that that might help offset these fee increases that we'll be talking about today. Great recommendations, but in accordance with state requirements, we must keep those separated. So today we're speaking only of the wildlife budget. The reserve balance at the peak was at $39.9 million in 2011-2012. The projected balance in 2014-2015 was $18.4 million. The anticipated decline was somewhere between $7 to $10 million annually. You can see that it would be depleted very quickly. Key points in this: the doomsday graph and the budget that we must approve each day is not based on a cash basis. It is based on a methodology that the state has established and that we must follow as we adopt a budget each year. The committee put that to the side and dealt with this as if each of us deals with our family's checkbook each month, and that is, we want to know the cash. We want to know what our cash costs are. We want to know what our cash depletion, if you will, of the reserves will be. That actual cash depletion is somewhere between $5 and $7 million annually, and that is what has allowed us to prolong it even beyond what the graph may have shown. Impacts to the reserve. We've already talked about the cost of living. It is approximately 22% greater than what it was this time in 2005. Our share of the state's increased cost to do business, that is costing this agency approximately $2 million a year. You know the cost of increase that our state has faced overall. That's our portion. Revenue from license sales have basically been flat. We have had one bright spot, and that is the stamp that is on ammo when you purchase it. TWRA gets a small portion of the proceeds. I believe it's 10 cents on each stamp. We also know how much ammo, the sales of ammo have increased in recent years. That has actually generated an additional $300,000. This was a hit that was unexpected, and it's one that I commend our staff for fighting, for petitioning, appealing, any of the words you want to use. But basically, Fish and Wildlife, the federal Fish and Wildlife, has disallowed the annual credit that we get for the permanent senior hunting, fishing, trapping license. That impact has been roughly $2 million per year since 2012. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end with that slide. The interest revenue from our endowment and our investments has been as high as 9.6%. The table in the back will tell you exactly where this has been. We're going to talk about what is in those funds in just a little bit. In fact, Ken presented it yesterday. Our current interest rate is 0.07%. Not, the decimal point is in the right spot. And we don't have as much freedom as some people may think on where those funds can be invested. We've also we are facing major capital expenditures. Our headquarters HVAC and electrical system must be upgraded. That's to the cost of about $3.5 million. Yes, it is a state building. Yes, we occupy it, therefore we must be responsible for it. ADA compliance. Those of us who have businesses that depend on sidewalks or roads, we know that the ADA compliance is bubbling to the forefront. Each community is facing this. Our agency is facing this to the tune of approximately $1 million per year. And then there's the upgrade to our law enforcement communication equipment, both replacement and upgrades, $7 million. Our last purchase of radio equipment, or the particular type of radio equipment that we are using, was approximately 17 years ago. 17 years ago, my wife and I went in business, and the cell phone at that time was known as a bag phone. And it was about this big, and it had one of those long VCR recorder batteries in it. That is how old our equipment is. You could not use that phone today. In fact, you could not use a phone that you probably purchased 7 years ago. Law enforcement across this state has faced this problem, and they're converting to more of a digital technology. We have actually prolonged our tackling this expense 7 years beyond when we should have, simply because there was not a clear path as to where everyone was going. We have no choice. Our equipment is wore out. Other agencies that we communicate with are already beginning to make this shift, including the Highway Patrol. This is an upgrade whose time has come. In May, the Budget Committee met to develop a proposal that would come before this body at this meeting. The discussion points at that time was to live within our means and, in essence, establish a reasonable reserve. Each of our communities that we live in, they call it the Rainy Day Fund, and each of the government agencies under that umbrella call it the Rainy Day Fund. We believe it is appropriate not to look out 6, 8, 10 years ahead, but that this must be checked every 2 to 3 years. It's time to discontinue building up a reserve that lasts us for so many years. And let's make our adjustments based upon the cost of living, whether up or down. And nothing would tickle me more than to one day come before this commission and say, we don't have to have an increase. It would tickle me all the more to be able to say we're actually going to be able to give a discount for the next 2 to 3 years. But continuing the path we have been going, as good as it's worked, and as long as it's allowed us to stretch out the current fee structure of 10 years, we believe it is appropriate, and its time has come to do that on a more regular basis. We actually went through the process of establishing what are proper rainy day fund thresholds, and we followed the lead of many of the communities that we reside in. Typically, a community will do their best to maintain no less than 3-month reserve in what is called the rainy day fund. Emergencies do happen. Catastrophes do happen. Unexpected costs will come up under those headings of emergencies. So what we also agreed is that the minimum that this reserve should ever get to is 2 months reserve. Based in 2014 dollars, you're looking at $18 million and $12 million respectively. The key components that were also discussed. I put these words on here and I'm just going to cut to the chase. Maximize efficiency, minimize overhead. We need to cut everything that we can cut. Each of our families faced this in 2008, 2009, and probably continue to face this. Each of the businesses that you're a part of face the very same thing. That is how we have gone at this. The first step was to take on the cuts that we can and should make. And I applaud the agency. Chris said it best. We're 46 less employees than we had in 2008. The second commitment the committee made is that our analysis is going to be on a cash basis. Again, that is the way each of us balance our budgets. That's the way this agency should. The third was a change in philosophy, but it's a necessary change in philosophy, and that is pay to play. Those that use our lands, our facilities, that may not be from the hunting and fishing community, whose resources have built these areas, those people must. These other users must participate in their upkeep. It's the very thing that the Tennessee Department of Transportation is going through right now. 15 years ago, you didn't see bike lanes on the roadways. You saw very few greenways, but there are new users to their facilities. You're seeing the 4-foot bike lanes, you're seeing the greenways, and those are good uses. Just as the uses that are coming onto our wildlife management areas, those are good uses. But we must address the cost to provide that opportunity and maintain that opportunity. The last and equally as important, we need to see what reinvestment options that we have. 0.07 is unacceptable. By the way, right now I think it's 0.09 as was reported yesterday. Basically zero from my standpoint. I wanted you to see the committee activities over the past year, beginning May 22nd. 4 of these 7 meetings were noticed and open to the public. In fact, the meeting at our commission meeting in October, I announced that the November 6th meeting was coming up where we would be discussing this very thing. The 3 meetings that were not noticed were merely where staff reported to us, or you will see in the name of the reinvestment on July 17th, Commissioner Cox facilitated having the state treasurer come to TWRA, and he talked to us about our investment options. We're going to talk about that in a minute. It was not grand news, I will tell you that. But that, we have been trying to gather information. We asked staff to come up with recommendations as to what we could consider as part of trying to address this budget shortfall. What the committee concluded is consistent with the trends that we were seeing, and that is that we must recognize a minimum increase of $7 million per year. At the time, we said we need to add 5% contingency to that for budgeting purposes. So our goal was $7.35 million. We were committed that we would not increase the income from fees any more than the rate of inflation, the CPI. We were going to address participation by all user groups. And some way, somehow, we were going to increase the interest revenue on our investments. Last but not least, again, the hit that we were taking with the senior license, if you recall, it's $2 million per year. That's unacceptable. And there had to be some way to where we could begin to not recoup, but once again, be afforded the privilege of the federal matching dollars. So that needed to be addressed. Our revenue proposal is this. The licensing fee increase will generate no more revenues than 22% of CPI. In fact, it is 19.1%. The additional revenue from those increases is $6 million. You will see that we are amending, eliminating, and creating different licenses. Let me run through that very quickly. If I can flip the page very quickly. Type 35 through 38 is basically the high impact user fee. We're taking what has been done in Region 4 at Royal Blue and creating a fee for those high impact users across the state, consistent with what Region 4 has established. 41 through 56, and a portion of the elimination of 40, 58, 59, 67, 68. We have brought more consistency with our range fees that are charged to people across the state. 82 and 83 addresses the one-day fishing, and we'll speak to that in just a minute. Fee type 256, 257 is an elk quota permit that has not been implemented in years. So this is merely a housekeeping item. There's also the creation of type 168 license. That is an amended annual senior license. And then 450 and 455 are residential guide license. As part of our budgeting analysis, and I've got to commend Barry Sumner for putting up with me for 7 months through this. History shows that for every 5% increase in fee that we take on as an agency, and indeed this is almost nationwide, there's a 1% decline in purchases. That has been accommodated in this analysis. Reinvestment on endowment and reserves. We are confident that we can beat this 0.07 or even 0.09%. My goal originally was to make what the Tennessee Promise is making, and that is 3%. Because of the limitations imposed on us by the state, and this goes back many, many decades constitutionally to some bad investments the state made before the 1900s, we are managing state funds, and therefore we are limited in what we can do. We will be lucky to get 2%. But we believe through some means of this reinvestment, we believe there will be an additional $250,000 increase in interest revenue. Pursue additional wildlife restoration monies. We believe with some modified bookkeeping that that's actually going to generate another $300,000. The senior license. We will begin to realize the matching federal dollars in 2016, 2017. I mentioned to you how hard Ed Carter and our staff have been working to negotiate a settlement with Fish and Wildlife. We've had the support from surrounding states. We believe and have included in our projection that this settlement will be happening relatively soon. We're 95% there. That should generate another $600,000 per year average over the next 6-year period. Go back to our goal of $7.35 million. If you total up all the numbers that I've gone through, we're at $7.15 million. That's good enough. That's good enough. But we have held the $7 million plus some contingency. That must be paramount. Quick summary. The proposed license increase is being distributed equally across all license category. Whatever that percentage is, generally speaking, it has been a uniform application. The new license have been created solely to assure that the user groups contribute. I know there's been some concern on the guide license. Our philosophy has been is that whether it be part-time or full-time, these guides have the opportunity to make a living based on our resources. Therefore, there needs to be some giving back in that regard. We are actively pursuing reinvestment options, and Chris, since our November meeting, has been pursuing a meeting with the State Treasurer's Office. We hope to report within the next 30 to 60 days what our options are, and at that time present that to the Commission to take action. Last is that the Commission and the agency, the Commission's being asked on behalf of the committee and the agency to revisit the senior license structure to once again be eligible for for federal matching dollars, and to seek a settlement which generates the $600,000 average per year. The comments that have been made to date. We already have a lot of cash in our reserves. Why do we need an increase? If you've got a pencil, here are the numbers, and these are the numbers that were shared yesterday. In our lifetime endowment, we have $38.3 million. In the Watchable Wildlife Fund, we have $5.9 million. Total that up, I had the June numbers, but we're right at $44.2 million. To some, you're going, why? You're saying $7 million. We must remind you all that we are only allowed to use the interest off of those dollars. And when it comes to the lifetime endowment, only those licensed where the person who has a license is over the age, I believe, of 16. Is that correct? You take those numbers times 0.0007, what those funds have generated for us is $30,000 a year. If we had been able to achieve even 3%, that would have been $1.3 million. There's basically no impact to our revenue side right now. And unfortunately, until we see a change in the interest rates overall, we will not see a significant help, but we are pursuing as much help as we can. Fees are higher than other states. That's true, and that has been true, depending on how you run the numbers. Chris made a point earlier. Our state is one of the very few that is independent from the general fund of state government. That was a decision made way before any of our time. Personally, I believe it was the right decision. It has meant that as users of our outdoor resources, we have had to pay a little more, but we have also had that independence. In the midst of that independence, we also have accountability. We have accountability to the legislature. They have set the boundaries of what we can do. Look at the other states that are lower. Most of those you will find have a different license structure, number one, so it's apples and oranges. But number two, they get significant dollars based on sales tax revenues, mineral rights, those types of things that this agency does not get. Again, we are paying in some cases more. My opinion is it has been worth it to have that independence. Impacts are due to the high salaries and vehicle purchases. And I have heard, I don't know how many times, I see all the new trucks on the road. This one, without question, is not true. Our salaries and their adjustments are held accountable to the state, period. We as a commission have no say-so in that. Our vehicles, those are state vehicles. Those are not agency vehicles. Typically, we get 7 years life out of them. We have gotten more. And I would respectfully submit those are the roughest miles of any other agency or department in this state. That is what we must deal with. So to say that these increases are us just having a heyday on salaries and vehicles, I respect those people's thoughts, and I respectfully say that that is 100% wrong. The new license are merely a fee grab. If you go back to the chart, and we've tried to be as transparent in this as we can, I encourage you to look at what these new fees will be generating. Will they generate some? Yes. And every nickel counts, just like every nickel counts to each of our families. But this is not a fee grab. This is, we believe, a correct philosophy that we're adopting, that those who pay or who play need to have the opportunity to pay and participate in their upkeep. Elimination of the one-day non-resident fishing will impact local economies. In some circles, this has been presented that this too is a fee grab. But there's a history to this that I think is important to realize. In 2010, we were asked to do away with the 3-day license and provide the 1-day license. The intent at that time, and truly it made sense, was that we will see a significant increase in license sales by doing the 1-day as opposed to the 3-day. Unfortunately, it has basically been flat. We have lost revenue going with that decision because there has not been an increase in license sales. Basically, the experiment failed, and it's time to go back to where we were in 2010. Increases will impact future sportsmen's license sales. There's been some outdoor writers speak to this, and one that I have a lot of respect for, Bob Hodge, wrote on this a few weeks ago. My respect is so deep for him that I started running the calculations. You know, what might we do? You've seen where we have to be, and you see the contingency that we have to have. The most we could help the sportsman's license would be somewhere around $3 to $4. And I look at that, and then I look at our entry level, if you will, small game hunting and fishing license that many of our poorest of the poor in this state have to buy. And I couldn't justify in my mind how we could achieve the $7 million that is needed and at the same time do everybody fair across the board. We may see a reduction in sportsman's license. That is a decision that each family must make. They may decide to go a la carte. Me personally, I will continue to buy this, not because I'm on the commission, but there's really two reasons in this. And that is, number one, frankly, it's pretty darn easy for me. And what I mean by that is that I don't have to worry about whether I have the right license or not. It's just easy. I know that I am covered in this state, with the exception of the federal waterfowl stamp, to do the hunting and fishing activities here. And I don't do that many. But the ones that I do, I'm safe. I have not screwed up. That's what I mean by it's easy for me. And I think some of you may have the same attitude, and I hope you will consider continuing that. The second is that I could go a la carte, but quite frankly, in my eyes, it's the right thing to do. And at this time, Angie and I can afford for me to do that. I look at it as funds going to continue to support our resources in this state. That is a decision that each family will make. Again, we did the increase across the board, uniform. The last is what I'm getting for my money. Whenever this kind of question comes up, I encourage the people to ask this question: what have you gotten for your money so far? And if I could read just through a few highlights on the personal side of the equation. This past year, we have had a healthy discussion, not only at the commission, but across this state, of is it time to go to a $2 limit? In 2004, would you have dreamed we would be having that discussion? We're hunting bear in Northeast Tennessee this year. We have bear on the campus of the University of Tennessee. And no, it's not the opposing football team. Who would have thought we would have had such a surge in the bear population that we have? Turkey are in more abundance than ever imagined, and those who pursue them are in more numbers than we ever imagined. The elk are self-explanatory. Look at the numbers, how they've grown. The infamous thing when I came on the commission, hogs, out of control. We have brought them back into control, or working towards that, I will say. Pretty drastic measures, but there were pretty drastic impacts to our agricultural community. Fisheries. You don't have to go much further than Commissioner McMillan's neck of the woods to see the number of out-of-state guides that bring their clients to our state to fish those waters. Go to the boat docks, go to the boat ramps. We must be doing something right. There's been a 58% increase in striped bass released between 2014 and 2013. Black-nosed crappie, 48% increase. Sauger, 51%. In 2004, there were 0 muskie being introduced to our waters. 2014, 5,200. To the point that Milton Hill Lake has become nationally recognized as a muskie fishing habitat. Who would have thought Tennessee would be known for its muskie? There are 69 new acres of production ponds. Over $6.2 million has been spent in upgrading our hatchery facility since 2004. Since 2004, 41,000 acres have been purchased, 69,000 acres have been leased. There are 3 new gun ranges. We have upgraded 5 of our existing ranges, and we've helped 5 communities build new facilities. Yesterday, you heard of 2 programs that this agency is actively involved in. The Moment of Freedom for our handicapped friends who are not as fortunate as most of us in this room. Toys, reaching out to our youth. The Wounded Warrior. We've seen the number of community celebration in my neck of the woods, Boomsday, or even the Vol Navy. The number of fishing tournaments have skyrocketed. Field trials are starting to grow more and more. The community celebrations, fishing tournaments, field trials, those folks are not charged a nickel. Your home community is not charged a dime. And yet our officers are there making sure that those events are safe and that those waterways are safe. What are you going to get? You heard it yesterday. Bobby Allison said it best. We're not satisfied for where things are. We had the discussion about the F1 bass and what can we do there. All I can encourage you to do is look at these past commission meetings. This agency, its staff, with the support of this commission, is being proactive in moving forward. The increases that we have seen since 2004 have been on an uphill climb, and we've seen remarkable progress. We're not going to discontinue that, and we're going to make sure that what we are implementing is right. That includes the wildlife management plan. I call it the organic approach back to wildlife management. Summarizing this, and I appreciate your all's patience because I've probably talked way, way too long. What Tennessee did when it chose to have its resources managed in the way that we do through this agency and independent of the general fund of the state. Though it is expensive to us as users, it was the right thing to do. And if you have any doubt about that, look at the surrounding states and how the political winds have impacted those resources in recent years of those particular states. This schedule's not of our choosing. We did not want to come with a fee increase. Selfishly, I would love for it to have been 3 years from now. I've been off the commission. But we have been in the midst of the perfect storm. That is exactly the way it was presented to the Haslam administration. You've seen the impacts that we have had. We have no choice but to be here today and act today. If you came in this room and or if anybody listens to this tape and is frustrated with the increase based on percentages, there's not a thing I can say in this whole presentation that's going to make a difference. You look at the percentages, you see 22%, 19%, and you're going to be frustrated. In the midst of that frustration, all I can do is ask you to do this. I want you to look at your own checkbook, your own expenditures. For those who are in business, look at your business expenditures since 2004. And I ask you to look at the change there. If we're going to be held to this percentage yardstick, then I ask you to do the same for your other costs that you have faced. Because of how this agency has managed its resources, its financial resources, we're able to come to you with less than the Consumer Price Index today, in spite of the perfect storm items. And that is a tribute to a lot of good people in this room. The increase on a general hunting and fishing license, just for what it's worth, if you're willing to go to this extent, we're looking at 10 cents a week, period. Sportsman's license, we're looking at 60 cents a week. That's what we're looking at. And so please look at it, if you're willing to, that way. If you want to stay at the percentage, then all I ask you to do is compare apples and apples. My last comment was the way this thing began, and I said that this is step 2 of a 4-step process in this paradigm shift. Step 1 was what it should be, and that is, what can we cut to make up this deficit? And soon after our May meeting, this committee came to the conclusion pretty quickly, we can't cut our way out of this problem. But there have been significant cuts made. Step 2 was to identify what is the deficit, a la $7 million, and what is the best way to make that up that is the fairest to all concerned. We've done our best to do that. We're still listening. Even after I sit down, we're going to listen to the comments you have. But you have my word, we've done the best that we can do. But there's still steps 3 and 4. And that is, we're asking each committee, wildlife, fisheries, those committees, to go back and look at what they're doing. What is their business plan? If we're willing to say you must cut here, are there places that frankly need increase in resources applied to it? How should we distribute the funds that the citizens of this state give us? That's a fair question. Are we about things that maybe we should discontinue? And then the 4th is for the budget committee to review those very things and begin this process all over again to see what our needs are, where our cuts might be. And then we go back to step 1. What should be cut? How do we address the revenue? Are we still providing a service that we should be about, or have we been sucked into history? It's the way we've always done it. And then the 4th, what are we going to be about? I appreciate your patience, Commissioner. I appreciate your patience with me. Mr. Chairman, I give it back to you.
All right, we're still